Welcome back. Now, my next example, I would like to place a notching to the mullion as well. That means what I want to do is I want to mill away the screw pocket here, and therefore I need to add another processing. I do the same way as before. Go to mullion number 1, right click, say new process, then I go to notching. Now you see as before, my mouse is like catching the endpoints here and also the sides. I can go on the front side or on the left side. And if you need to place the work operations on a different side, which you can reach in this view, you can always press the shift button, hold down the scrolling wheel on the mouse and slowly rotate the profile. Like this. But in my case, I want to have it here because I want to take away the screw pocket. So I try to place it roughly maybe to the gasket groove here. On that point, I click with my left mouse button, like this. It looks actually pretty okay, but it's a little bit too much maybe, if I have it here. You see, this is, I don't need to take away this extra because this will take extra time on the machine. But I can always adjust the parameters to the left. So if we go here to the properties, I can see I want to have the 0 point, the start of the bar should be 0. The page 2 is okay. I see it also here in the section view. And then I have the corner section is bottom, it's fine. And here I see, okay, it's not exactly correctly on the profile, so I switch this to 0 millimeters and set, already have 0, it's okay. And the depth is fine, it's 50 millimeters. And then we have the height and the width of the profile. And the width in this case, look here, it's marked blue. This means, okay, this is in this direction along the profile. So if I want to make this notching higher onto the profile, I have to change this value. For example, I could say 40 millimeters, enter. And you don't need to click apply anymore. This will also save you a lot of time. So what I have to change now? First of all, I will change the height in the Y direction, the green one, to 16 millimeters, because I know the screw pocket in FWS 50 is exactly 16 millimeters. Say OK. And then I want to go to the width here and like we did before, we do a formula, because if we change the floor recess for this element later on, we want the notching to adjust accordingly. So I go to width here, and it really doesn't matter what it says here, the formula is always default when we use one. Then I go here and click on the button, and for this function I use the floor recess as a formula. Say OK. And then you see here, width set is floor recess. And also you saw what happened here, because we have 100 millimeter floor recess in our element, it jumped up to 100 millimeters. And now if I change this in the element view, it will also change. So this is one example how you could add a notching operation onto your profile. The thing is, we only did this now for the first mullion. We also need to do this for the second, the third, the fourth mullion. And maybe we want to use this processing for future projects. So what are we going to do to fix this? In the past, we used processing lists. I think you're all familiar with those. What we did now is that we are replacing the processing lists. That means everything what you've done in the old Chocal MCO mode will still work. That means all the filters, all the processing lists, everything you've done, nothing will disappear, nothing will get worse or something. Everything will just get better. So we now want to save this to operations to a processing group. And how do I do this? First of all, I look to the left is the easiest part to find my information here. If I don't find it, you can always use the new filter function. If I, for example, want to search for only user-defined processing, I have to click here on the arrow, and I say, yes, only show user-defined processes. Now only the things I just did will be shown. You also see here that you have like a asterisk next to the operations. This means this is something I made myself. And always if you change some information on a profile, for example, if you move or change a T-cleat or a drainage or whatever, you will always get an asterisk, because this means you're now going away from the Schuko standard, you have done something yourself, and if something is not correct on the machine, then it's easy to follow up and search. So please be careful when you do changes to system processing, which comes from arcade drawings, for example. Always be careful to make it right. The same goes for the filters, for example. If you want to change something automatically every time for each element, you can do this, but you will also get the sign where it's done. So what I do now, if I want to save this, I mark those two working operations with a shift button, right click, and say I want to save this as a processing group. I say OK. And now I have a new way of saving everything. That means we now have a folder structure like the Windows Explorer, where we can easily sort everything up exactly the way we want it. We can save it for different folders with different working operations, different profile names or systems or whatever we want. I've chosen to work with different profile systems. So I say, okay, now I need a new folder for FWS50. I say new folder and name it FW50 and say a name. And now you should think smart when you're naming the processing groups, because they should also be easy accessible and also easy to search for. In this case, I say I have a hole 10 millimeter and notching. I would actually make this more detailed, but for now I say this is fine, and I say okay. So now we have saved those two working operations to a processing group. So actually I could delete those processing whatever here. That means I could right click here and say delete, or I could go to the processing window, hit delete on the keyboard, or right click and say delete. So this is not deleted because I still say that that's a processing group. Now I want to add this information to all the profiles in the element. Therefore, I switch to the element view, and now I want to add these working operations onto the 4 mullions I have. The easiest way to select the mullions, you could of course rotate it like this, and you can select with the shift button one by one. This takes time and it's not the best way. Therefore, I would instead go to the selection tree up in the right corner. Here you can do all of the selections. In my case, I want to find the profiles, the mullions, so I go to Profiles. I see here the top 4 profiles are my mullions. I press the shift button and click with my left mouse, and I've selected all 4 mullions. Then I can right click on the selection and say Add Processing Group. And where do I want to have the start point? I want to have it in the bottom of the profile, that means start of bar, so I click on the top here. And then I come into this folder structure where I save all my processing groups. And I just saved it under the folder FWS50. I click here, and now you see, here's my processing group. You also see a small picture, which wasn't the case in the past. And this makes it also easy for you to find the right processing group to use. I click this, say OK, and now you get a small notification next to each mullion profile. And if I now go back to my processing mode, we should be able to see that the working operation had taken effect everywhere. So I go to the processing mode. I now marked all my 4 mullions. I go to the back, and I see here I have the hole, the 10mm hole, and also the notching, which is now the case for all the profiles. And I also see them here in the processing window. If I go here, they're all marked. If I go to the mullion 2, you also see it here. And this is the easy way of doing it. So this is how you could easily add processing group. And also, this is not only for this element, I can also use this processing group for all my future projects and elements. Now I presented to you how to do notching in the new MCO mode, and I hope you liked it. I think this will make your life easier working with Shuko Machine Control.